It's the Bud Grant Show. With Minnesota Viking head coach Bud Grant and Channel 5 sports director Bob Bruce. Now, here's Bob.
Hello again, everyone, and welcome to the final edition of the Bud Grant Show for the 1981 Viking football season. Today at the Met, in the final game at the Met, the Vikings lost to the Kansas City Chiefs by a score of 10-6. With us, as always, to talk about today's game is the head coach of the Vikings, Coach Bud Grant. And you would like to end the last game ever at the Met on perhaps a happier note, but it just didn't turn out that way.
I think we had everything worked out except the last play. You know, if we could have scored on fourth down from the 4-yard line, I think we could have all walked away with a better taste and a happier feeling in our mouth, and we got everything taken care of but the last play. We just couldn't handle that.
That last play is almost an example of everything that has transpired over the last 5 games. You were so close, as they say, but yet so far.
That's very true, and I think we had 5 games that we could have won with one play. Down at the end, we won a couple of games on the last close to the last play, but you've got to win the majority of your close ball games. We tell the players that half of our games are going to be decided by less than a touchdown. It's going to get right down to the wire, and we've got to win. You can't win 3 or 4. You've got to win 5 or 6 of those 8 games to come out on top. We just weren't able to do it.
Before we talk about the season as a whole, a couple of personal achievements today. Tony Galbraith started his first game, and I thought gave a pretty good accounting for himself.
It did, and I think the field conditions were something he wasn't entirely used to, and caught the ball, was our leading receiver, rusher type thing, and I think Tony will give a good account of himself next year, and from here on in, I think we'll get his weight down just a little bit, but you can see some of the abilities that he has in today's game.
Sammy White went over 1,000 yards receiving, as did Joe Sincer.
Yes, and those are, individual achievements that they can look back on. I don't think they really savor those achievements today. Sammy had a couple of balls that handcuffed him there, and same with Joe. It wasn't a great day for offense. The field wasn't real good, and the weather was, damp and cold, and the gusty winds sailed the ball on you a little bit. But it was the kind of day and the kind of field and the kind of score that we kind of predicted. It was a low-scoring game, and they got the big play that won it for them.
The big plays coming against a Viking pass defense that has had some problems, and there were 2 big pass plays that really gave Kansas City the chance to win the game.
Well, yes, of course, the one we had a blitz on, and they threw the long pattern and got down in there. Then we kept them away from the end zone, and then on a scramble, they got the touchdown. And that so many times happens, all the planning that goes into what you do, and then it gets down to an ad lib, and that many times is the difference in the ball game.
That last drive in that ball game, such a pretty drive. The kind of drives that the Vikings were making 5 games ago, yet you get down to the goal line and you just can't put it into the end zone. Something, I don't know what happened, and I'm sure you've really searched your mind trying to find out what this team lost 5 games ago.
Well, I think Kansas City is an excellent team. They're a very good defensive team. They had a lot of low-scoring games, and they're tough down around the end zone. They've proven that all along. Our defense made a great, stop. They went on 4th down, figuring they could win the game and they could make a yard, which they didn't. Got us the ball. We moved down the field, got to the 4-yard line, and then Kansas City made some plays, and we didn't. And that's the kind of game. Well, I think the field and whatnot takes away some of the things that you do, but you have to give them some credit. And we just didn't make the plays, as you referred to, as we have earlier in the season. And you've got to make the plays in the close ball games and with the opportunities that you have.
Was this a tough game to try to get the players up to play? I mean, was it because it was really for nothing, but it was one last game that had to be played?
Well, sometimes the nothing games are pretty important. I think you saw Chicago had a nothing game against Denver. Came out very well. You've seen some of the have-nots, later in the season, the Washingtons and teams that got off to bad starts. Come on, they found, hey, losing's no fun. Winning's a lot more fun than losing. And they've found out that, they loosened up a little bit and come on and played well at the end. We didn't. Maybe the pressure down the line or whatever it is got to us a little bit, but we just didn't play as well. There's no question about it. And yet, the last, 3 out of the last 5 ball games went down 1 point, and a touchdown around the 4-yard line. Had we won 3 of those games or 2 of those games, we'd be right in it.
In just a moment, we'll be back. We'll look at action from today's game when the Bud Grant Show continues. Coach, as we get into the first half action, kind of surprised me that both teams could only come up with a field goal because it seemed like they had more scoring opportunities in that first half.
Well, you did have some. We started out fairly well. Moved the ball here. You see a little screen pass out to Teddy. We moved the ball down at their end. We only had 2 penalties in the ball game. One after we got down to their 4-yard line with a run, and this is one play that kept us alive there in the punt where they did run into Coleman, and that kept our drive alive. But when we got down in there, Tony ran the ball down the 4-yard line. We were called back and had to settle for a field goal. And here you see some of the running there. You can see the footing was, everybody's taking little steps trying to keep from sliding, slipping around. We had Tony, of course, and Teddy Brown started, and when we went to our three receiver offense, Tony stayed in. You see here Tony catching the ball. He gets some extra yards, both running and catching, because of his good balance and, of course, his size and his strength, which lies mainly in the big thighs and legs that he possesses. But Kansas City, played a good defense, and here you see the field goal by Dan Meyer. They try to block field goals much like we do with their 2 leapers, and that was a good shot, and that was into the wind too. Rick had a good year, got 2 field goals in this day. Here's a break we got as McNeil made an interception, our turnover of the game. We did give them 3 fumbles back and an interception, and that again kept our field position in pretty good shape. Here's that we give that back, however, as Tommy moving around, and again, field is not that great. He had to step up inside. The ball was stripped, and we lost all important field position at that point. Fuller back here, and they threw some little passes. I thought our defense played fairly well. When they got down in there close to scoring, we held them out, and at halftime it was 3-3, and anybody's ball game was going to go. We talked about at halftime, whoever can make the big play, whoever can create the break, we can put the game away.
In the second half, particularly the third quarter, as we go to those highlights, Kansas City came out really strong with their first possession, and eventually with a couple of big pass plays went on to win.
Well, here, watch this. These are the kind of things. Watch the ball bounce off the shoulder of this man, and if that would have bounced over his head, we might have recovered that for a touchdown. Instead, they get the ball out past midfield on a fine run on a badly mishandled kickoff. They go on from there and get a pass reception. Some fine running on this little pitch that they ran a good deal there. I think that was good decisions on some of their plays. They were straight ahead type of things, this type of thing where you don't have to do much weaving or bobbing or cutting. Just keep your traction, keep the momentum going straight ahead. Here's a good throw, good catch over the middle. But still, we were in pretty good shape here. We had them in 3rd down situation. Got a good rush. He scrambled around, finally hits the receiver, all coming away from the backside along the base of the end zone on a scramble, and that was the only touchdown of the ball game. We come back late here and a pass to Rashad, who sat out the first half to kind of rest that arch and make sure he could play, get all of it out of the second half. And Tommy on the money here, but Sammy just couldn't get his legs going under that ball enough to find the handle on it. And then we come down here to Tony on a 3rd down play. Does not get us the necessary yardage, and we have to settle for a field goal. Figuring we had to score twice to win. We get the field goal, and of course feeling that the touchdown would win the ball game for us. And we get that opportunity late in the game here, and we hold them on 4th down. Joe Sensor, who was still bothered by that knee injury, doesn't have the full mobility, but still caught some important passes. You see Tommy rolling out. Watch the move here by Tony. Good move on the linebacker, and then gets those extra 3 or 4 yards just with the drive. We're down 30-yard line. This is a big play as he hits Tony out in the flat, and I thought Tony might have scored here, but there were just too many people. He gets down to about the 5.5-yard line. A run up the middle. You see Tony come in here. We thought we could split that defense. Unfortunately, we weren't able to do that. Tommy's out here, throws to Joe Sensor, and you can see how well he was covered on that particular play. And that was a 4th down play with about 20 seconds to go, and that was the ball game, that was the season.
Well, you lose to Kansas City. It's been a disappointing season, especially the second half, but maybe with as young a football team as you have right now, I know the youngest Viking team since the 4 years that I've been here, maybe they can learn something from this season.
Well, I don't know if you learn it. So many of the plays that you're involved in are just the things you don't work on. And you know, Kansas City started out 6-2, and they went the other way. We see it happen so much every week. You just got to win the close ball games. You've got to get some of those breaks that go your way. I mean, who can explain why Cleveland, the hot team last year, winning the close ball games, are where they are at, or the Rams, you know, or Atlanta, or Houston, you know, just to name some teams that were in the playoffs last year, or Oakland, who won the championship, who hasn't been in contention all year. Next year, that's going to turn around again. There's going to be some more teams that are going to make their move and win those close ball games, get those breaks that it takes, because we're also even now that it's hard for us to answer why why some of us aren't more successful, or continuously successful, or continuous improvement that you don't see.
Do you think that the years are gone forever where one particular team will dominate the league like the Pittsburgh Steelers did at one time, the Miami Dolphins, or even the Minnesota Vikings?
I'm sure that day is past. We used to line up and say, well, there's going to be Dallas, the Rams, ourselves, and somebody else in the playoffs, and there's going to be Pittsburgh, Miami, Oakland, and somebody else in the playoffs. That day is over. Every team in football today can make the transition. You find the Giants, Cincinnati, San Francisco doormats a couple of years ago right back in there. Their fans and their media and everything are ecstatic with the progress that they've made and come back. And maybe that's good for football. It's tough on some of us, but maybe it's good for the game if you can look at it from a long-range view, which I can't at this point.
Have you, I believe one time in your career up in Winnipeg that you had a championship season and then came back the next year and had a bad year. This is a big challenge for you to come back next year.
Well, yes, but there were different circumstances. We had a number of injuries that year and went from a championship team to a 1-win, 1-tie, 14-loss, and then came back.
This is not quite that situation.
And then came back the next year and went to the championship game the following year. So it's a little bit different because we don't have nearly that amount of injury that we had that time. But that can happen. You're going to find the last place team, and now it's not a big thing from jump to last to first. And you saw Tampa. We played Tampa here. You heard their coach, just berate their players for not playing hard, not playing well. And here Tampa came up with 2 big wins. Beat Detroit at home after taking a loss from San Diego at home in the last minute in their ballpark. Football's. I'm glad I don't bet, because we'd all be broke.
In just a moment, we'll be back and we'll talk about that final game that was played at the Met, the last football game there forever, and some other things when the Bud Grant Show continues.
Okay, Bob, how do you want to do this segment?
When you come back, I'll lead right into the tape, and after the tape we'll talk for a couple minutes or so, and then we'll take a break and then come back and do the playoff thing.
How long does it take to make a sweep? A minute or? Yeah, you can see it now. Yeah.
The last segment will pretty much be just the playoffs.
About a minute.
How much time we got left?
About 10 minutes.
Okay. So we may be a little short, but that we don't have to worry about that anyway. We got to open in.
I'd like to say something about the fans at the end too. I mean, not the destruction, but the other side of it. I mean, the positive side of it.
You want to do that in this segment or after we do the playoff?
Sometime. Yeah, I mean, maybe.
How would you want me to lead into that? To talk about? You don't want to talk about the destruction that they caused.
No. I'm talking about.
Just the fans in general.
The fans have been good. They come out and everybody was there. They wanted to see us win. And they supported it. I mean, it's a positive thing compared to some places.
Well, we can do that.
As example, Kansas City, they're playing.
We can do that right out of this weather stuff.
Yeah, they're contending last week, playing Miami to rival. 40-some thousand people there, a 73,000 seat ballpark.
Yeah. Well, today was the final football game at the Met, and we have a little bit of videotape here about something that you will never see again when it comes to Viking football. And I know that a lot of fans are going to miss it, and I'm sure you're going to miss it, Coach.
Yes, it's going to be difficult and different to look up into the dome from now on, and there are going to be a lot of memories, and a lot of people can remember our stadium and some of this kind of football. Here you see Osborne, Joe Kapp in earlier days in the snow. Seemed like every time we're on television with some kind of a snowstorm, we got a reputation that wasn't quite true of this area because we played a lot of games in good weather, not all bad weather, but we were remembered for all the bad weather, the bad games, and those were earlier days, of course.
You know, one of the biggest advantages I think that the Vikings have on their side, and will come back next year, is tradition. Very, very steeped in tradition. And part of that tradition, of course, is not only the players and not only the great games that have taken place at the Met, but also the fans that supported those teams.
Well, that's right. I think today was a good example. You know, everybody there wanted us to win. I mean, they were. This has been a tremendous stadium for fans, even though the sight lines have been bad. You know, field far away, weather conditions. Yet we've had some of the loyalist fans in all of football. Today was no exception. Everybody came. They wanted to be in. They wanted us to win. We could feel it. I only feel bad that we couldn't, but we got the greatest fans in the world.
And this is not, and some people in Minnesota may not realize this, but this is not really the case all around the league. Fans that stand by the team, even though the Vikings had no chance of going to the playoffs.
That's true. I think even Kansas City, I was talking to their coaches, they played Miami last week, a chance to get in the playoffs if they win the ball game, 40-some thousand fans in a 73,000 seat stadium, gorgeous, beautiful stadium. Our fans have been great. I think we've, you know, reflected in what the enthusiasm they've created, the interest that they've created, and I'm just sorry today we couldn't have had everybody walk out of there with a smile on their face.
I guess the next obvious question is how will moving into the Dome change Viking football? Because Viking football had an image, and that image will indeed change.
Well, you know, we won a lot of games in weather like this, in games like this, winning, you know, with 10-12 or 16-6 or whatever, those close, tight, bad weather ball games, which we thought we were better than the other team at. That's going to change. We're going to play in December and January, and we're going to have the big scores, the skilled people, you know, inside of a dome. Statistic-wise, I think you'll see we'll be able to maintain the kind of statistics we have early in the season. Kicking game is going to become important, but I think the players we have enough skill with our, let's say, our offensive team. I think we have to maybe bolster our defense to counter the other team's skilled people in our new dome. But football will basically be the same that you've seen the last couple of years from us in any event. Will
the dome play a role in how you draft players this year?
Well, I think if we had a chance at a Brooks or a Delaney, you know, one of those real super scatbacks. I'm not talking about the Sims. He's a bigger than they are, but somebody who could really burn. Yes, I think there's a chance that we could utilize somebody like that to make that kind of a big play, knowing that you're going to play, you know, 8 or 9 or 10 games in a dome every year, and they're going to have that opportunity to, you know, to use those moves and those abilities.
We always talk about the draft on the last show of the year, and this is no exception. And I know you always tell me that we're going to take the best athlete available. But this year, I think that this could be probably the most important draft coming up for the Vikings in quite a few years, because this could be the draft that gets you that 1 or 2 players that really contribute next year.
Well, we'd like to think that. And yet I think it's very difficult to project at this time and say this is what we are going to draft. I think we want to upgrade a lot of positions. I think that, you know, we're going to see some people that were drafted a year ago that be able to do some things. People like Jarvis Redwine, who played all of his college career in artificial field, all of his practices on artificial field. Maybe he can do, you know, some things in the dome that we haven't been able to utilize him in our scheme to date. So I think you'll see last year's players come to fore just a little bit more. But if we could draft, you know, a player, a skilled player, or defensive back or somebody, they could come in maybe and help us right away.
So in other words, there are some players that this year will really be a year for them in which to mature and possibly contribute more than they did this year.
I'm sure. I think our rookies from last year, the McDowells, the Senlines, the Redwines, you saw John Swain play today as one of our defensive backs a half a ball game. I think those people will make themselves known a little bit more.
There really are quite a few names on that Viking team that really aren't brought out publicly much. Irwin in the offensive line and a couple of the others that you mentioned that are players that really could contribute next year.
Yes, I thought you saw Dennis Johnson play today. You know, there'll be some new names, and there's an evolution of football and that takes place, and on every team. We hope we don't change 10 or 12 players every year, because that means then we're just, you know, changing players and not really upgrading ourselves. But hopefully we can stay where we are as a contending team, so that we win those close ball games. You know, that's all it takes. And then when you're in the championship, you're going to find now in these playoffs coming up, somebody's going to get hot. They're going to get the 3 or 4 or 5 turnovers a game that it's going to take. They're the team that's going to go on.
Well, you mentioned the playoffs. You're an expert, and we're going to get your opinion on the teams that will be participating in this year's National Football League playoffs when we continue. Tell him we'll do the NFC and then come back out and then go back and do the AFC, and then we'll wrap up the show. Oh, how'd your pheasants go?
If we go 3:07 here, we'll stay on time.
No sweat.
It snowed both days, and I went down by myself.
After today's games in the National Football League, the playoff picture is pretty clear, except in one situation. So let's look first at the National Football Conference and those games that will be taking place. First, the wild card, the New York Giants, for the first time in years in the playoffs against the Philadelphia Eagles, who have sort of been in a tailspin.
Yes, and there's going to be some upsets in this. Of course, the favorite is going to be Philadelphia, and the favorite is going to be Dallas in those games. But yet, there are going to be some upsets. And how you're going to pick them, I don't know. But Philadelphia and Dallas look like they're on a collision course.
Tampa Bay at Dallas. San Francisco, of course, gets the bye. And San Francisco, what a surprise they've been. They could take it all this year.
Well, they could. And, of course, you dodge the bullet when you get the bye in the first, not involved in that wild card. And they're going to play at home. That's going to be an advantage, I'm sure, to them, although their field is not the best. It might work to their advantage because they'll be used to it, as opposed to Dallas, as an example, or Philadelphia, play on artificial fields, fast tracks. Maybe the 49ers' defense and offense is geared to that slow, soggy field that they could play on.
In the AFC, the wild card game will be Buffalo at the Jets, and then Miami against either San Diego or Denver. That depends on what happens in San Diego's game against Oakland tomorrow night on Monday Night Football, and then Cincinnati has a bye.
Well, Buffalo and the Jets take turns of beating one another badly, but they're playing. The Jets are playing at home, and they come up with a big effort, against Green Bay. Miami's got to go to San Diego, or you might say Denver. They got a tough chore, but I don't know. I think San Diego is going to get knocked out of there, either by Miami or the next game.
Quickly, your two teams to make it to the Super Bowl, just off the top of your head.
Well, I like Cincinnati and Dallas.
Cincinnati and Dallas in this year's Super Bowl. And that's a pretty good bet, I think. I agree with that also. A quick summation. This is the last Bud Grant Show. If you can, into a little short couple of sentences, summarize this year's season.
Well, you can't do it in one sentence. You got to do it in stages. We started out hurt, come out of training camp, looked great. Then we lost the first 2 ball games, a close one to Tampa, and Oakland blew us out. Then we had a winning record, and of course the end of the season was just plain frustrating because we felt we could win 2 of those last 5 ball games we're in. We didn't, and I think frustration is the key word at this point.
Well, it won't be too terribly long before the 1982 season starts. That's it for 1981, and that is also it for the Bud Grant Show. My thanks to Coach Grant for giving us his insights and comments throughout the season, and of course he'll be with us once again next year on KSTP. Until next year, next summer when the Vikings try to come back and regain that Central Division championship, for Coach Bud Grant, this is Bob Bruce saying good night and thanks for being with us all season long.
This has been the Bud Grant Show with Minnesota Viking head coach Bud Grant and Channel 5 sports director Bob Bruce. This program is a pre-recorded presentation of KSTP Television Sports.